to our life.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على مبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم ألهمنا رشدنا ووفقنا بما تحب وترضى أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Peace and blessings of the Almighty be upon you all. For our short reminder this evening, we will be continuing off of our Quranic Exegesis series. We have now reached chapter 10, verse number 3. In our previous verse, under study, we talked about the i'jab, the astonishment of and position that was held by some of the individuals at the time of the Prophet Muhammad. And the statement that indeed, inna hada la sihrun mubin, inna hada la sihrun mubin, that indeed the Prophet Muhammad as an individual is considered a magician, and that the revelation itself is considered a magic. This statement here is of two forms. Essentially, it is a double-edged sword. One side of the coin is that definitely this particular type of mindset, these type of individuals, they recognized that the Prophet Muhammad was unique. And as such, they described him as a magician. As for the Quranic text as also being described as a form of magic. That is because, again, they recognize the unique essence of it, for which it describes itself and for which it speaks in its methodology of speaking to the voices and hearts of the people. So it turned out that on one end, it is a recognition that the tool they had to describe the scenario was a form of magic. On the other end, it was a demonstration that indeed the Prophet Muhammad is very much unique, and that the revelation he claims to be from the Almighty is very much unique. These are two important points because the Islamic theology, it teaches two key characteristics. It indeed teaches monotheism, but monotheism with the concept that God is still living, had lived, interacted, and still interacts with his creation in a way that suits his majesty, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as such, this comes in the context in a form of revelation, that this revelation is a representation of that interaction. And as such, it becomes a guide. And that essentially, if we can recall, in the chapter we are studying, Alif Lam Ra, Tilka Ayatul Kitab al-Hakim, a book, a revelation, indeed filled of wisdom and that which is considered as a guide, as a course for that which we can come to know as being good and for that which we may come to know as being evil. So the discussion that arises at this particular point is the opinion out there held by some people, which Islamic theology agrees with on half of it. As for the other half, it needs elaboration. And that is the discussion that I believe there is a God, but I believe that God created the universe, but he left it alone for human beings to find out on their own. And as such, religion essentially is not needed. Okay, it is not needed. In this claim, it goes into a discussion of behavioralism, what is right and wrong, and can human reason alone figure out what is right, and can human reason alone figure out what is wrong? So the traditional position of the Quran is that there are inclinations of the human being that helps guide it, which is the disposition of God, known as the God spot, for example, among others, fitra, placed in the human being. So they have a constant call, wanting to figure out purpose in life, about God, a discussion, figuring out the answers to the mysteries of the world, among other key points. With this position, it comes into the discussion of behavioralism, that in the end, however, there needs to be, or there should be, a guide that helps the human being in times of crossroads, for example, know what is right and know what is wrong. And we can get into very unique questions, which we will save for another time. A simple question would be, why is bestiality, for example, wrong? What makes it wrong? What if a person argues it's okay? Or pedophilia? Or, for example, incest? Why is that right and why is that wrong? Etc. With that in mind, this leads us to the point we're in here, that essentially the Almighty, he has provided these references as two forms of reflection and revelation and signs. One is that in the nature, that which is found in nature, in that surrounding we are in, and the other is found within the reflective arguments and verses that are found in Revelation, and in this context, for this ummah, this community, the Quran, for example. So we reflected upon that. Now the Quran goes into the second point, and or the first point, depending on how you look at it, and that is that there are signs and symbols and miracles that are found in nature when you look to it and you ponder with an open heart, and a sincere refuge. The Quranic verse at hand is إِنَّ رَبَّكُمُ اللَّهُ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى عَلَى الْعَرْشِ يُدَبِّرُ الْأَمْرَ مَا مِن شَفِيعٍ إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ إِذْنِهِ ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُوهُ أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Okay, this Quranic verse in Surah Yunus, the chapter for which we are attempting to provide an acceptable and applicable Quranic exegesis, tafsir, explanation. And this particular verse, turning from verse number 2 was the reflection upon the Quranic verses as symbols and signs, and why the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad are legitimate sources for our reflection to come to the conclusion, indeed, there is an Almighty. And then the Quran goes on to elaborate on the other side, the other form of essentially an element to study, which is nature, the creation that surrounds us at hand. The Quranic verse says, إِنَّ رَبَّكُمُ اللَّهُ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى عَلَى الْعَرْشِ. It provides the conception concept, which is, does something come to exist without an idea before it, or does the idea come first? The Quran is saying here that the idea comes first, then the design comes second. And that idea, Islamic monotheism argues, is the Almighty. And the design is everything else. So this is a very important point under argumentation, and is one of the things that it is reflected upon severely throughout the Quran. And in that discussion, to help us understand a little bit more, can something that doesn't know what sight is create sight or design sight? Can something that doesn't know what hearing is create hearing or design hearing? Can something that doesn't know what ability is create ability or design ability? Here, the argument in discussion is, does the idea come first in cosmological perspective? Idea comes first, then the creation, then the design, then the project? Or does the creation, the design, or the project come first, then the idea comes second? So traditionally, as you can understand, the majority of the human race argue that ideas come first, and then the design comes afterwards, because there's a preemptive thought to create the design. In the Quranic argumentation that is found in this verse, that the Quran essentially, the text itself in the previous verse, and now the argumentation that indeed there are things that you can relate to every day to know and come to the conclusion that indeed a idea came first, and that idea which came first comes from, Muslims would call, the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala, the will, the ability, the designer, and thereafter the design comes second. Again, something that doesn't know what sight is create sight. أَلَهُمْ أَرْجُلٌ يَمْشُونَ بِهَا أَمْ لَهُمْ أَيْدِي يَبْطِشُونَ بِهَا أَمْ لَهُمْ أَعْيُنٌ يُبْصِرُونَ بِهَا أَمْ لَهُمْ آذَانٌ يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا. Hand doesn't know what ability is, can it design ability? And this is a very important observation for our thoughts. Here the Quranic verse, it reflects upon these particular argumentations, that indeed there was an idea, and that is the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ رَبَّكُمُ اللَّهُ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ. For Muslims, we don't say it's an idea, we say it is, He is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah itself is extremely unique, the linguistic term of it. الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. The designer, the idea came first, then the design came second. And that metaphor, that statement is connected by khalq, which is creation, design, to make, come to be. خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ. And this is a key point, because sometimes we think because the Almighty and there is an engineer behind the existence of life, that means there's a contradiction to the statement here if we say that it was created by the Almighty. How so? Some people say, or hold the view, it's because the Almighty, when we study science, geography, geology, history, biology, we find things went through stages. There was a form of evolution and natural selection and these type of things. Okay? And the key point here for our thought is that it is true the Almighty can order something to come to exist, and it will be and was. And this is the Islamic position. But it is also true that the Almighty will order something to exist, and it takes time for that being to reach a particular pinnacle. And what exists is its creation, its primordial form, as it progresses into something. So the will of the Almighty can occur in spontaneous ability and moment. It can also occur spontaneously, but through time reach its pinnacles based upon the permission, will, and choice and design of this unique being, the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is demonstrated in this verse. So when we study geology and history, we do find out that Earth came through many hundreds of thousands of years. Okay, and there was times of extreme heat, and there was times of extreme cold, and then there was gas, and these type of things, a singular nebula, and from that singular nebula there was an explosion, and then it went through stages of heat, and then the Earth came back into being pulled back. Big Bang theory is discussed, and these type of things. There are verses in the Quran that reflect upon these things. Okay, and the human race comes to exist after hundreds of millions of years after the inception of the earth itself. Okay, the Quranic verse, it elaborates here, and it says, yes, the idea comes first. The Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala allows out for the will, but then it says He is the one who created and designed the heavens of the earth and the earths that are out there. Fi sittati ayyam, in a time period which consists of two phrases, sitta and its consonant known as ayyam. So if you read some of the traditional books of old scripture and it mentions the prior scriptures, you see there's translations of the meaning. Sometimes it says 6 days, and on the seventh the Almighty rested. Okay, in Islamic thought, as many of us know, the Almighty, He didn't rest after the design, utilizing a concept of sitta and a period of ayyam, which we will talk about. And the Almighty, it says, وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِن لُغُوبٍ, and no fatigue of any form fell upon us. So the Almighty doesn't sleep. It doesn't have names and attributes that demonstrate a form of limitation or weakness. Okay, وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِن لُغُوبٍ, and no fatigue came upon us. The Almighty was ever able afterwards and capable, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a key point that Islamic theology, it argues and compares in between, and when you go into polemics, in the demonstration between the concepts of this sittati ayyam, 6 days to design the heavens and earth, and now the seventh there was a concept of rest. It is true that those that hold that view from prior traditions, they have exegesis behind it, explanation behind it. Some of them will take it literally, some will say no, metaphorical. In the Quranic sense, we find that that seventh day rest isn't there. And on the contrary, the Quranic verse, it says that the Almighty had no form of fatigue. Number two, words that are utilized is sitta and ayyam. Sitta does denote the number 6. Okay. However, ayyam is also involved. And ayyam, you'll find some people, they know ayyam to mean day, day and night. They think of a 24-hour period. Ayyam in the Quranic text is different than that, especially in this verse. Okay, it is a unique time, and one perspective is that it denotes a 1,000-year period. Abdullah bin Abbas mentions, and the point behind it is that the concept of day in this phrase is not alluded to what we understand of day and night. The sun wasn't created yet, for example. So with that in mind, they are long periods of times. And we say 1,000 years is an indication of long periods of times. That is one interpretive analysis of that particular meaning, because there are numbers in the Quran and in history and among cultures that give reference, not necessarily to that specific number, but it is an indication of something, like maturity, like the age of 9, maturity, or the number, for example, ألف شهر, 1,000 months, or astaghfirullah, 70 مرة, 70, the number 70 means quite a bit, numerous, limitless, many other things. Okay, so this is very much important to know, especially terms that are utilized in an era in comparison with a culture, in comparison to an era, another culture, and another linguistic format. So taribat jabinuk, you translate literally, could mean that may your forehead be dusted with dirt, fall upon dust, descend upon it. Of course, it is not a physical, literal concept that some people might understand from another culture, but it has another connotation that is formidable for a particular culture and notion. So here, the Almighty describes essentially that خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ, a unique time frame. The description of that is in Surah Al-Fussilat. Inshallah, another time we'll talk about. ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى عَلَى الْعَرْشِ. It talks about here the concept of a throne, al-arsh. And what is important to recognize is that the Almighty says that He is the idea, He is the designer, subhanahu wa ta'ala, khaliq, the creator, okay, and is the one whom incepted everything other than Himself. So this includes anything and everything. This includes heavens, it includes the skies, space, the nujum, the stars, earth, land masses, gravity, etc. But it also includes this concept of a throne, al-arsh, arsh al-Rahman, right? The throne of the merciful, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the throne itself is a design of the Almighty. Islamic theology, it teaches a number of things that are important. Number one is that time, when it comes to the understanding of God, number one is that time itself is a creation of the Almighty, and time doesn't affect God. Number two, the Almighty is the creator of space. Space. And space is not something that surrounded the Almighty. The Almighty is the creator of space. Okay. Number three, we said time, we said space, also anything other than that. And this also includes the concept of movement of God. And it says here, the design of the heavens and earth, then it says al-arsh, ar-Rahman al-arsh istawa. And the throne. Does that mean that the Almighty is sitting on a throne like a king sits on his throne? And the answer is no. Okay? He is the creator of the throne and the creator of the creatures that attain the ability to uphold such a thing. And this is, again, a very key important element, without diving into too many details into the meaning of what Arsh is and its relationship to such a thing. The Almighty's sifat is He is above, He is ever high, and He is near through His sight and His hearing and His will, abilities, attributes. What remains and always connected to the Almighty is sifatu al-ula, sabbih isma rabbika al-a'la, the consonant and name and attribute of God, always connected to the Almighty as being the ever high. And high is a symbolism to mean the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever respected and above anything that is degraded or anything that is below, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you read Quranic verses, just remember something. Remember that reflection, that لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There's nothing like unto him. The Almighty is above the heavens in a way that suits his majesty. Okay? And it's a very simple component. And this is a key aspect of Islamic theology and Islamic traditionalism. يُدَبِّرُ الْأَمْرِ, he is the facilitator and the organizer of the will of inception, okay, and order. مَا مِن شَفِيعٍ إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ إِذْنِهِ, that there is no form of intercession except after the permission of the Almighty. Let us stand and discuss something here. If everything comes into existence by the permission of the Almighty, what about evil? If we remember the prophetic tradition where it says, وَالشَّرُّ لَيْسَ إِلَيْكَ, that evil is not of yours. This is one of the prayers the Prophet Muhammad used to say, نَحْنُ بِكَ وَإِلَيْكَ, that evil is not of you. Okay? So the Almighty's will is of two forms, a universal will and a legislative will. The universal will is things that come to exist by the permission of the Almighty, but the Almighty is not pleased. This is the layman's version of it. Is not pleased with its existence. So there are things in the Quran that are halal and haram. Halal is, they are given guidance, haram is specified. So that which is specified is considered haram, forbidden. One of them are some of the things that we understand to be halal. قَتْلُ النَّفْسِ الَّتِي حَرَمَ اللَّهُ, murder, transgressive murder. It happens out there, but that doesn't mean the Almighty is pleased with it. And as such, when it comes to guidance, remember something. And things that happen out there. لِمَنْ شَاءَ مِنْكُمْ أَنْ يَسْتَقِيمَ, whomever wants to and seeks truth and guidance and uprightness, let him do so. Do so. Apply it in your life. Live that code. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا يَشَاءَ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. However, this ignition and permission of your ability only occurs after the will of the Almighty. And similarly, al-jazā'u min jinsi al-amal. You will find in your life, for the actions you choose, a reimbursement. Okay? The choices you make, you'll find its reflection upon you. So as such, يُؤْفَكُ عَنْهُ مَنْ أُفِكَ. People are turned away from of the truth or guidance, they who choose to turn themselves away. يُؤْفَكُ عَنْهُ مَنْ أُفِكَ قُتِلَ الْخَرْوَاسُونَ الَّذِينَ فِي غَمْرَةٍ سَاهُونَ. Among other verses. So there is a qadr, a divine destiny of the Almighty, a divine will of the Almighty. In His divine will, He gave us free will. In that free will, it's underneath the discretion of the qadr of the Almighty. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. No intercession except after the permission of the Almighty. ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُوهُ أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Your Lord is He who designed the heavens and the earth, who created from these things, which was created from nothing. And it was created over a time period. And it was the idea before its inception. It is the one, He is the one who facilitates, يُدَبِّرُ الْأَمْرِ. He is the one who facilitates the order of the universe, allows for its existence, its facilitation, where the earth is placed to allow for its existence within it. Had it been closer to the sun, many of us know it would burn. Closer to away from the sun, it would freeze. The concept of DNA that is already found, like a computer code, been written out, which is in our blood, that leads us in our choices in life, the way we look, the way we think, the way we act, our choices, our abilities and capabilities, all found essentially in the DNA. مَا مِن شَفِيعٍ إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ إِذْنِهِ. There isn't any form of intercession except after the permission of the Almighty. ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُوهُ. This is the Lord you are asking about. This is the Lord you are looking for. He is here. Take that into consideration. Seek that path. أَفَلَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Why not ponder and really take into consideration this message that is at hand, and as such thereafter apply it in your lives. Until we meet again, brothers and sisters, The Almighty knows best, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take care, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.